August 6th, and then you were telling us, okay, $40,000 to $45,000. Otherwise,
It's what the county probably would cost us to have this special election. That's what they're using.
otherwise, we do it on the 21 ballot.
Got the May ballot.
Yeah.
And the things that we had talked about before, I think, were the changing the P and Z.
That's one of them.
Okay.
Changing meetings.
Back to the original charter.
The appointments, and we currently don't have any way
To remove.
to remove or what is the process to replace, like,
Some
One
of
of
those
our-
can be done by ordinance, some of that's by ordinance, is that correct?
You
Paige?
can change your boards and commission ordinance to have a provision for removal for the boards and commissions. The one that we need to just double check on is there's some case law around removal of P and Z members, so I just got a question whether that needs to be done by charter or by, if you can do it by ordinance. So there's a case where, let's say you tried to remove, I believe it was San Marcos tried to remove their P and Z, and the P and Z member sued because and it had to do with how the removal process was spelled out for that city, whether it was by charter or by ordinance. And so if I can give you that information, you can do it by ordinance or you need a charter.
The Paige is correct, the other boards and commissions cannot be removed by just an ordinance.
Yeah. Yeah.
So our biggest concern was how place one can't appoint a place one representative.
Change it back to the way we use the appointment process.
Yeah, you can do that in the charter, and so it would be very clear and can't be changed by future councils.
Yeah.
You can accommodate that under your current process. You've got the board selection committee process, so you can accommodate that through your current existing charter by ordinance, but it wouldn't, it wouldn't be something in your charter that is gonna survive a repeal or amendment of the ordinance. So that's the difference. And I think by accommodating it, the way you would do it is you still go through your board selection and you would have maybe each individual council member gets to nominate somebody. And then it still has to go through that board selection interview process as well.
But the problem is, I'm sorry, the problem that I see when it got changed to basically a majority vote of who gets replaced, we're the elected officials, and it seems like we were elected for a reason, and we need to have that same representation on P and Z, not just, a political appointment versus, what I mean, like majority. So, am I making any sense?
We wanted to go back to the P and Z because I see what you're saying, Paige, but the problem with that is it can still be staffed, right? And we want the P and Z to reflect the will of the voter. And that's what would happen because really at this point, if we get elected and then somebody is completely ideologically opposed and they just refuse to tailor to the will of the citizens, it's easier to remove one of us than it is to remove the city P and Z member. So we want the will to reflect the will of the voters.
And I'm not trying to
Sure, I know.
get in the way, it was just a patch to
Yeah.
to a charter election.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Yeah, just a way to maybe
Yeah.
get to the charter election.
So
When you hold it.
the other thing that would be something that we might want to put on there is the 4B company, the organization that the 4B incorporated. And that, let me tell you, I think that is something long overdue, I believe, just because I think it gives the city, I mean, we've played with one hand tied behind our back for so long. And I think this helps correct that. Doesn't all the way, but I think it certainly helps.
Not on that subject only, but is there, Paige, I know we can talk about this once. Is there any instance that maybe if you're looking at something over a multi-year period, that it would make sense to have a non-binding referendum?
Yes, yeah, but, it may be a good idea for you as the council to consider adding to your charter, if you're going to have a charter election anyway, the ability to have a non-binding referendum that's initiated by council. And so what that means is, right now, the citizens can request that council consider adopting an ordinance. The citizens can compel the council to do that by submitting a petition. And then if you don't adopt the ordinance, then there's an election to let the people decide. There's another tool for the council to get an idea of what the citizens
Where
think
they
about
stand, where they
something.
stand on a big issue.
Yes, by having you as a council, so waiting for the citizens to to cause the election, you as the council can put something on a ballot to see what your voters think. And it would be non-binding, so it gives you the ability, you can make it either binding or non-binding in the charter, but if it's non-binding, you as council can put it up out there, see what people think, and then make your decisions.
But then, like, let's say we do a non-binding reformation on something.
It would have to be something that the council has the ability to do.
Right.
Yeah.
It doesn't make any sense otherwise.
An example would be the, like, the city of Austin's had a couple where they did one with the Uber, the Lyft, that whole thing about, do you want us to be able to regulate Uber and Lyft or not?
Is that non-binding?
I think theirs was binding, so that was binding. But then they also had one about the domain, the domain.
Well, I think that was one.
Yeah,
was
so
Tax incentives?
right, the tax
It was.
incentives got challenged, people didn't like that it was getting paid, so the council had an election about the issue.
But that would just be one other option in addition to just taking an actual referendum. That may be something y'all would want or not want.
So if we were to do a non-binding reformation on a 4B, is that what you're saying? Those are separate.
They're just saying as one more thing that could be considered in a charter.
Yeah, if you want to just put it on the list of charter amendments, it's totally separate and it's a tool for you to use. It seems like, I'm just saying, it seems like councils want to know more what the people think.
Right.
Yeah, we need
And
you
it's a way to do that without having a binding action
Sure.
on the council, but it's a way to find out. You can do
it's kind of polling in a way.
Yeah, you can do surveys, you can do polling.
There's really no
just to
harm in
see-
that unless it costs more money.
So-
I have been in cities that have done that have tried to gauge at different time periods. Actually, one included, it was a non-binding, where two cities are next to each other, even looked at consolidating in one. So they both took non-bindings. One was overwhelmingly, let's consolidate, and the other one was like, no way. And then, so that settled it. They didn't want to take it any, so both
That's
houses.
why we're not in Leander Park.
Yeah.
Can I ask y'all a question? I mean, has anybody ever thought about a homestead exemption for the city? Instead of lowering taxes, we would just grant the homestead exemption, so it would be permanent. But is that a charter?
That is,
You wouldn't be able to change state law.
No. Whether we have a homestead exemption is our choice.
In the city
I
limits.
see.
The county has one.
So other cities around the city, Cedar Park just enacted one maybe a year ago.
Yeah.
Did they do that through election?
Well, and I can't remember.
I can ask.
And also to affect the city, over 65.
well,
Some of those you can just do by.
I believe some cities will do a charter amendment. It has to do with, basically reduction of tax rate. Basically,
I think it would be great to do it by charter, so no council can undo it without.
we probably, there's a couple examples I think we can look at.
Yeah.
The only issue always is if some cities I think that have done this, if they ever hit something dire, right? where you have, let's say you have to replace major infrastructure. The only way to do it, your bond debt's here, the only way to do it is to have a effectively higher tax rate, not above what the state will. Then going and getting it back, changing it back, then means going back to the charter, another charter election, which again, sometimes, and it could be,
So the question
I think
would
there's a couple
be,
cities we need to look at that have done this and also look at the history of how it works.
I think the question that we would ask Robert is, would a 1.5 cent reduction be more or less than a homestead exemption? And at the very least, I think we ought to go for people 55 and older.
Yes,
Yes.
I think 48 and older. I think 48 and older is a good.
Yeah, the over 65 exemptions, I really think we need to do that.
So how would that?
We're gonna have to do some research on this because I think that there's more than one way to cut it.
We'll get it on.
Well, we have to August 6th.
What,
2 weeks.
Yeah.
2 weeks?
Robert, we'll have to,
Or on the projection.
Is it something-
Paige says no problem.
Okay.
Robert and I, so.
As far as
Is there a maximum, Troy? A maximum to consider right here?
For charter amendments.
Is there a maximum that we can consider for charter amendments?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, here's what I believe how it's worded. It's, I think it's typically a certain amount of pennies dedicated to tax reduction. I think that's how they're worded. I believe Galveston has a provision, and there's a couple others I can think of. That's probably what Cedar Park would have adopted.
I was going to say, you go ahead.
You want me to go? You want to go? Probably sound better, you said, you said.
So basically, a portion of your total tax rate is automatically by charter goes back to reducing the rate.
No, these are not to die by sword, but thinking term limits, thinking maybe consider cap on campaign contributions, make people have to go sell their ideas. I know that it gets messy. I know there's a hot button.
The next one is the big one.
And then the one that we really want to see is that if you're a contractor, and I want to make this clear to everybody, this is to protect council, staff, and vendors, is if you have to go out and you have to bid on the contract. There's no more this, well, we're gonna do this internal stuff and kind of not have the process. It should be, everybody should know from day one that you're gonna do business with the city, you're gonna contract it out.
You're gonna bid.
You're
So
gonna
in the case of, so they'll have to have procurement guidelines. So you would want to do something above and beyond what state law would be for, let's say, engineering services, that they can give you a cost proposal, so you require an RFQ.
Yeah, but there needs to be a carve out. We need to have a carve out that says, except for essential, like the water we're doing right now. We need to have a mechanism where we can go in and get contractors.
Typically, what you would do is do a large RFQ and kind of evergreen a list of those vendors, but they would have to be basically, they'd still have to go through a process at the beginning of 1 year.
Well, we would have to clean up our process, obviously, right, but make it where if you the city.
Mike, man of the day.
Yeah.
And
You guys did that.
basically, so we're not like in the position that we were just in with our.
So that's a franchise.
Yes, there.
So that's separate right now. So a franchise contract, I guess, with a vendor.
That's my big.
Yeah,
Like
It should-
volume anyway.
always have to go back to open bid every 5 years, certainly 10.
Mike, what are the long
15
ones?
Rather than we're not in the position
Mike.
we were in the last deal, I think we did the right thing for the city. And this is
What are the long
that way going forward, the rules.
So
that
there's
we are
sausage and
setting,
cheese.
Really lay out, just
In the charter. we're trying to-
Really laid out. There's no mistaking it. A contractor is targeted, has a contract, knows they're going to come, and they're going to have to do so with their numbers, everybody else.
Actually,
Everybody knows it's coming up.
I'm one of the ones that I have to agree with.
I think so. That would be.
Breakfast around.
They just financially.
Let's start shaping.
Contracts.
But how would that work with staff, or do we have to vote on it? And what's the point what's the criteria?
Well, I guess what I'm hearing is the charter would just address that. Well, I guess, let me make sure I'm understanding it. It's,
Our charter would define, more clearly define above and beyond state law,
yeah,
our procurement process.
you'd have so we're talking about contracts, so not, if you're talking about hiring, not talking about hiring staff, or you're talking.
No, I'm talking about, okay, we need to build the road, we
Vendors,
hire somebody to
vendors.
build the road, so we have to put it out for bids, so we get 3 bids.
You just.
And how do you choose which one? Does it come before council, or is it?
So that process would stay the same.
Yeah.
We're saying that you would have to, that process would have to occur. That it just can't come, staff wants to negotiate this contract. Okay,
Okay, so that's a simpler thing to put in the charter.
Yes.
You just have.
It should be a
and let
simple
me
thing.
be completely transparent, that is to protect, all parties
Contracts or something like that, maybe, I don't know what exceptions you might do, but bid all contracts or bid all of these types of contracts. And then you get into the details on your procurement process as far as what has to come to council, what doesn't, because right now, anything that's under
50.
and is the city
Right.
manager. So,
I don't think it changes anything there. I just think a simple amendment or simple change to make sure that we're not, that the city and everyone, all of us, including, like, especially, what do you call it, franchise
Well,
vendor?
there's the franchisees, but then there's development services and engineering services.
yeah, so those are two categories. One is, what do we have to bid?
Yeah.
We say bid, we put it out for advertisement,
Okay,
and then at least 2 weeks later.
And that's construction activities.
And that's construction, goods and services, and you get all your bids in, you total them up, and you either do best value or lowest responsible bidder. And so that's one set of people, and then the next, and that's for things 50,000, over 50,000.
yes,
So you can lower the bid threshold by charter or not, you can lower the bid threshold by procurement policy adopted by council to give more flexibility, so that's one category. The next category will be professional services that you don't have to try to get the lowest bid because you don't want to pay the cheapest amount for your engineering, for example. It's not a good measure.
Which they can't.
But you can't.
They can't
by
be
law.
with the way the way that engineers, that being said, you RFQ them and then negotiate a contract.
Right, so it's qualifications, who's the best qualified, and then you negotiate, so that's another category. And then I guess the other category would just be other exempt. There's other categories that are exempt, like solid waste services are exempt, competitive bid, and then you have discretionary choice. That's that final category.
I think one thing too is if you're gonna look at thresholds, there's also, as things have gotten more expensive, I think it's a balance between, obviously you want to get everything out there through the solicitation process. But then if you, depending on where you put those thresholds, you could end up with a scenario where all kinds of things have to go to council that might not have, and then it may slow your process when you do have smaller change orders and things like that. That's one thing.
can I say one thing, Chris, please correct me if I'm wrong, the intent here is, I'm just gonna say it is for this council and future councils to not be able to let corruption come into this process.
To let what?
Corruption, right? We don't want people to go, this is my friend and I'm gonna benefit monetarily from this. We wanna take that out of the equation, right? We want it to be,
cronyism.
call it whatever you want to, but what we want is put a upright policy in place going forward that you can't manipulate this portion of it, right? I can't have a friend over here that has this business. And I'm not saying that's what just happened. Obviously that's not, but it didn't protect anybody. It didn't protect the last member because they 18 months. And it was just kind of because the political winds and change, things are complicated, and they kind of got hurt by that long process. Had they known that this is day one, this is 5 years, at the end of 5 years, everybody, I've got to re-put that bid out, just like if I never had the contract.
Yeah.
That's what we're trying to do. That's it. We don't want future
Go back to the
corruption
RFQ.
in this process.
What we do not want to do is we don't want to bog down staff and make it hard to do.
Yes, no.
That's the opposite of what we're trying to do here. I think just, this is more of a high, I guess I was trying to explain a high level situation versus the minutia. I don't care what every bid could be separate, could be different because of whatever the job that we're bidding out. There might be different things that need to be, and I think that staff should have the ability to set those parameters in those ways. I don't want to, as a council, tell staff, hey, you better do this parameter, this parameter, this parameter. That's not my place to say those things. So I think this is a high level, just making sure that everybody's on the even playing field, that especially with a contract, like a big franchise contract that's, maybe 5 years, let's say, that would be something that everybody knows in 5 years. That's, if you're worried about your numbers and all the stuff coming out, whatever the situation is, just know everybody knows the situation. We're gonna come in here, we're gonna do it right. Staff's gonna make the recommendations on how we go about that bid, and then we'll make a great decision based on all the information we have in front of us, or whoever's in those seats.
And I have to say, I mean, look, I'm a big believer in bidding things out, but, I've seen things on agendas where things weren't bid out, and the rationale is, well, we've never bid those out. They do a great job. There's a lot of companies that can do a great job. I mean, a lot of companies. The rationale for bidding is that,
It's an even.
once you go down that path, that, yeah, it's so much easier to work with ABC company because they know us and they've always known us. ABC company, if they know that's the case, and people know, they're not gonna always give you their best price. Of course they're not. And it removes all that,
And one thing we've already started doing in some cases, when there's been, let's say, a project that's locked down or a change order and something, we've actually brought some things to you a few times. Actually, we have another one that's coming on, maybe it's the senior center, I can't remember which one, which project, where it fits within the guidelines where the CM's office could sign it, but it's been something we've been discussing for some time, so before we move forward, we need to bring it just at our discretion. We need to bring that so you all know, okay, this is where we are. Signature authority aside, this is 25,000 or something, or 20,000 or 15. But y'all need to know because this is something y'all been deliberating for some time. I think that there's probably a balance where we can codify some of this, or we can even, what about adopting, what about purchasing? I know what y'all want to do is make sure that even if y'all adopt purchasing guidelines by ordinance, that they're codified for future administrations and councils. Is that?
Well, so on the franchise part, you could put something in your franchise section that says, so there's a difference between like a PEC franchise, you're not gonna build it down.
Sure, that's a state.
Sure.
Yeah, it's a state issue.
Yeah.
And you your ability to bid your franchise has gotten way down, so it's really the ones that you contract with to provide city service, like the
Yes.
solid waste. You could put in your charter that you have to competitively bid those every so often.
Sure.
So you put a requirement in there for that, and that takes care of that one. And then you could also define generally your other types of bids you want to go through. And then I know from administrative side, those bid processes take a lot of time and effort and resources. So if there's a way to streamline that, and there's places that have streamlined it, like the Bible, they've already bid it, you just document it. So like someone who's already been competitive with bid, but the other thing I've seen is some places will for the consultant services, they'll do kind of a big overall RFQ.
Yeah.
And
No,
they'll
basically
have a
evergreen a bunch of firms,
Yeah.
pre-qualified.
And you have a list of them, and you cycle through that, and you re-up that requalification every so often. So I don't know if that satisfies your concerns, because you go through a process and you have a list. So you're gonna have a list, and they're gonna get used for a while. And then maybe.
I don't know if I like that.
Cycle through.
Well, we have talked about,
It's a year.
we have talked about doing that as a first step.
There's a lot of advantages to that, so where if I need to, just remove a wall in the building, that may be just a $5,000 or $10,000
Yeah.
job.
But they've been procured.
Okay, so yeah,
I've already
that,
qualified those.
I'm talking about the big again, because I mean, not just the franchise, but I'm also with
Let's
like
not one.
engineering.
It's like a regional we've used.
So it's not the same.
It's not the same company over and over and over again. You
No,
don't.
and actually, that process will give you the ability to, you can then go out for prices, right?
Yeah, a lot of times you're able to get just a number of vendors that you can utilize for different services. And so, for remodel work, you may have a couple of different companies available to choose from, plumbing, electrical, so.
We've done that for tow trucks too.
Yeah, and so,
So you could actually still go get 3 prices in those cases, where you've already pre-qualified.
I think
It's like, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I just wanted, I think part of what you and I are seeing and concerned about with the professional services is there's a very small pool of engineering services in particular that we've used for 20 some odd years. And we see issues with our overall CIP, supplementals, the engineering services was underbid, or they missed some, or whatever it was.
In that, I'll tell you that, having been on the consulting side, but just on the professional services side, not the engineering side. To your point, sometimes familiarity over time, I think that there is sometimes a take it for granted situation, not pointing at
We're seeing
anybody.
that in my.
But this is not rare, this happens everywhere, because what happens, you may have a large engineering firm, and they basically have all of the historical data and engineering data for your community. And basically you bring another one in, they kind of gotta go relearn everything. So,
Yeah, but it keeps everybody on.
correct.
I
Yeah,
think
yeah,
that-
that's what I'm
And
saying.
that goes to my point again, the whole point of this charter amendment is you can't eliminate corruption. People are gonna be corrupt, and they're gonna find ways around it, but to make it as hard as possible, right, for this to happen, to make it hard for engineering firms to overcharge on 1,000 little things, right? So.
For that matter, even getting sloppy.
Well, that, we've
Even
been
getting sloppy.
identifying that, right? We've just recently identified those little, how they're safe. They can't bring the cookie jar long enough, they don't care. They don't care. They've grown complacent, we've grown complacent. If we have something in place that prevents that, that's what we're asking for. I don't, you can word it however, but if it meets that intent, you can, I'll speak to do, whatever, just.
But, yeah, I'm sorry to add on to that, so when you wanna bring something to us on a CIP that needs additional funding or the next step approvals, and I think, David, that goes back to all the discussions we've had in that checklist of the summary. We can't just get one page showing us the supplemental, we need the whole package of the history and that checklist. You used it to draft your,
The next 2 items on the agenda are down, the last and price and news. I've got those scopes in there, we can kind of go down there
perfect.
and look. And I think this answers a whole bunch of questions, it's something that's deliverables, so.
Yeah, but
Yeah, I mean,
again,
we've talked about the other thing is getting down to the actual deliverables, where you're actually, that's how you're getting paid.
but what I'm requesting is if it gets put on the agenda, we need all of that information. So I know we're catching up and trying to do something that's never been done before, but if it's important enough to get on the agenda to ask for additional funding, then we need all of that.
And part of what would help with this cycle that we're in is, I've noticed that when we get an RFQ in, that consultant gets that and it's off the races and we get the bid, we try to do it done, whatever. But if council gave us permission to go ahead and engage a second or even third consultant, if that first consultant doesn't engage, that slows us down, and we're coming in with this high price, is that something we can do?
That's something that you typically do.
Absolutely. I thought we were doing that.
But we have to go back to council to engage that second one.
Why?
So that's what I'm asking, could we as staff go engage the second one?
That would be part of the motion, though.
Just added it.
I would just add it that, yeah, when we go through the original approval to engage.
That might help us speed it up a little bit.
Carter, would you-
I know what you're saying.
I just assumed that
It's
that's
when-
what you guys.
well, I think, well, no, what David's saying, I think we're getting into some of the micro where, what David is saying, typically, when there's a recommended firm to engage with, it's got the highest qualifications, that if that breaks down and they don't give us something that's, we think is adequate or fair pricing wise, that it automatically defaults that we can trigger that. I think that we're gonna have to look at that page to make sure that we've got that, we have that covered, that we can default to that without having to go back to y'all to say, may we please then go to the second. That's what he's,
It slows us down.
Absolutely.
we have to document that obviously in an adequate way.
Can I ask, because I know you're getting ready,
Yeah.
really just 5 points, you said term limits, what, how long?
I don't know, that would
One
be.
is 30 years.
No. Well, here's the point. We're all citizens, we're all a community, let's give everybody a turn. Right, or call people to step in that way. Lord knows I don't know. Right, but I just think, we hear in our country, everybody always talking about term limit, we can set an example. We can say, and I don't know, y'all come up with, if y'all wanna do that.
I think 2 terms, and because we're 3-year terms, not 2. 2 terms, council, 2 terms.
Campaign contributions, what we-
I don't know if anybody wants to tackle that, I just found that for me, all the junk, all the misinformation garbage that was put out last year, was all about money. I think if we eliminate that, and people have to go out and sell themselves like we did.
Yeah, but you know what, here's the thing, there's already contribution limits statewide, I believe, but here's the problem, I've seen people in the past, you say, okay, let's say it's $500. You know it's $500. So then Joe, developer, has his form, give you $500. And he has his superintendent, give you $500. And his attorney gives you $500. He gives you $500. You see what I mean?
I'm saying if you camp out, it's an arbitrary number, you go $5,000, you can raise $5,000, that's in your pocket. Wait a minute, hold on,
I'm saying it's total cap.
a total cap, right? And that way, look, there's city officials in other cities last year that spouted on how horrible money was. And they're raising ungodly amounts of money right now in their local election. Leander has a chance here to be an example and say, you know what, we're not gonna play that game. We can take all of that option out of the air and say, we're going to put into place that the person running for an office has to go out and sell themselves and their ideas.
I'm not sure that's it.
Okay, but here's.
We did.
Here's the caveat to that is a PAC can pay for ads, signs, all kinds of stuff. So you're really not accomplishing that. I'd say transparency and accountability. So we could put a limit on how much you can give, 5,000, but that wouldn't even pay for all your signs. But beyond that, any PAC anywhere has the full freedom to spend money.
They have to
On your-
go do it.
See, I would rather have, I get what you're saying, I think it would be better if people that gave money had to state whether they've ever done business with the city, or are they in an opportunity to do business in the city? Or did they work with anyone else that does business in the city? Because let's say you even gave to a PAC, well, if I accepted money from this PAC, then I would have to be able to show who gave money to the PAC and have they ever done business with the city of Leander. That, I think, is, that's transparency, because I don't think that exists now. You know, you give money to the PAC and you can remain pretty much anonymous and you don't know if it's your wife, your sister-in-law, you don't know any of that.
Again, I mean.
So my thought on that is, you know, we get money as a candidate, and, you know, quite honestly, if people come before us, I have no idea who donated. I have no idea, and I don't wanna know, I mean, because it does not matter. So when it comes to things like that, yeah, the full disclosure, I don't wanna be clouded at all by somebody that comes before us. And, I mean, because we're not representing the people that wrote checks, we're representing citizens. And, I mean, I know that we can see past that, but it doesn't, but not always. I mean, that's not, it's hard for people to see past that.
But here's the thing, we know that one or two headlines, right, can ruin a person's name, right? And it doesn't matter, right? But I mean, and so just how they word those headlines or how do we instill trust back into reasonable, not the fringes, but the reasonable people that hear these things and believe them, right? Well, so-and-so took so-and-so from this developer, so they have to be corrupt. How do we instill a fix for that? Is there, or is it just the world we live in and that's just the way it is?
I don't think because that was the big Supreme Court case years ago about political donations and restricting those. And the court sees it as freedom of speech, number one, or, that you can support whoever you want to, and there should not be limits on that, right? So I don't think you can.
So Dara, it was just a thought, I'm just trying to think through ways to make our city where we can be the example, right? That we can stop all this partisan garbage that's trying to come, or the corruption, again, all of that. How do we make an upright city that people look to us as an example? And if we're doing the same thing that everybody else is doing, I don't see how. But like I said, that's why I said it wasn't a sword to jump on, it's I wanted to say it needed to be said, and so there it is. I'm a church.
Well, just from a global perspective, I think that even going back several decades, I think the thing that what kind of opened your eyes when you went from being in college, working in government and such, is, and I think that the most citizens probably as well, and I know that, of course, we have our state law and court cases that dictate a lot of it, but it's when vendors, everything from vendors, engineering firms, planning firms, developers, and others provide contributions. And I think in most people's minds, would be a concern is that if they're doing business there, are they getting a special advantage for that? And I think this is an issue, it's not just here, this is statewide, obviously you don't read the paper and some of the instances where it has come up where people that have actually attempted to skirt what the law is.
Well, can I just say something about that? I think that people also make donations to make sure that others are not getting favoritism. Because they get the right people elected and they know that others are not gonna get, and then they.
But I'm talking about people that are connected to, say, corporate interests.
It's worth having a conversation.
I'm saying corporate interests, where there's actually been cases where people have worked to try to extend the chain, and they've been able to prove it, or they're trying to extend the chain for business purposes.
But what I don't want to do, and, when I was running for mayor, I had a neighbor that was moving to Florida. By the time I was sworn in, he had moved, and yet he believed in me enough that he wanted to help the city that he had lived in for 15 years. So, I see nothing wrong with that. He's in Florida. He's not in a position to ever need to do this.
And I'm not talking about those, but I'm talking about some things that Jason was mentioning, just in the global sense that, again, not just here, but everywhere, that I know it's come up with a discussion about vendors or certain firms that, there are certain professional firms that don't make contributions, and then there's others that have historically made contributions all over the state in the places that they work. So,
And to all candidates, we've seen.
they usually, typically, they will give to both candidates in every single seat, and kind of claim victory every single time.
What I would like to see is our ethics changed a little bit in regards to if you're an elected official, you can't go to work for another company that's done business with the city or received monies from the city for any development for a certain amount of time.
It's already in there. It's already in there for 1 year.
Well, and maybe change the enforcement then.
I thought they just extended it to 2.
Well, I think that the issue is, if somebody knows about it, somebody better say something, and I think that would be, if there's a concern, if there's an issue, like if I personally see something or whatever the situation was, I can tell everybody in this room or anybody that works in the city that I will be saying something if I see something. I'm new to the council, I share a lot of the same beliefs that Jason does as well too, as well as how we're gonna run business, but if that's something that I personally see or I personally know about, then that'd be fine. Now, so it's up to the people that are involved in running the city to get on board with leading the forward. And quite frankly, not looking behind right now, but moving the city forward. And this is the expectation, and these are the things. That's the reason we have an ethics commission. That's the reason that everything was drafted in the first place. And if it's not going to be used, it's not going to be enforced, and that's an issue that we have overall. So my part of leadership in the city would be, if there's an issue, say something.
So Paige, could we increase the penalties for a company that might violate that? So in other words, Joe Smith, Mayor Joe Smith, he votes on, $1 billion project. He leaves office and 3 weeks later goes to work for Joe Smith as a consultant. So not only do I think the mayor should be under penalties, I believe that the company that hired him should be, whether we're receiving.
Basically, debarked locally, would that be the term?
It's already in,
No, not for companies that hire him.
yes, it is. I'm telling you, here's what it is there's like a $500 fine
Nothing.
for the elected official. But there is a clause in there that says if that company who is now engaged an elected official within the 12-month safety period comes before council and does not disclose that they are now engaging that politician, ex-politician, they could be faced with either a misdemeanor.
But there's also the penalties and ethics ordinance by the company as well.
What are they?
What would be a $500?
I mean,
But it says something about a
It's kind of like campaign finance.
That's,
I think it's time to leave it.
Any type of.
Any questions about that? If it ever-
yeah, so it's
A $500 fine.
so do we have the latitude to increase the penalties as a county?
you can do so in the charter, or you can have an ordinance amendment.
That's the ticket right there.
Ordinance amendment.
And I would think that would be a very hard thing to cover as a council, change back. Yeah, let's lower it back to 500 from 40,000.
Oh, well, you can stick within your statutory authority, but if you're.
Is it 2,000 the max?
It's, but again, it has to be related to zoning or health and sanitation, or there's a list of, you could look at doing a civil penalty.
And they lose,
If we're authorized to do civil penalty by law.
so let's say that they have a 380 agreement and they lose funds, can they automatically, kind of those incentives be taken away?
Could you embed that clause in the 380s?
We would need to update the
The ethics
ordinance,
clause.
decide if it's going in the charter or not, if it's too in the weeds for charter. We put it in the ordinance, and then we make it every contract is subject to those terms. So we have to get all the paperwork in place.
And it says that, Robin, on our application forms that get submitted and then come before council, like on the very bottom, doesn't it
And
state?
that conflict of interest form that you
Yeah.
fill out.
Yeah, they have to, it's in their application, they have to.
So the applicant who is engaging in this behavior actually has to sign, they read it and sign, so they can't say they don't.
But that's, I mean, if it's.
Yeah, but it's $500 fine,
Right.
you know.
So as far as the charter goes, you could look at some broad language there, but if that's too in the weeds for the charter, that, and you could put it in an ordinance, and that would, you could connect that fairly quickly, by ordinance.
Probably something I would be interested in doing.
Me too.
So, are we interested in putting something on the November ballot? That's the question. We can't vote on anything today, but this, is
Does it
that
seem
right?
like does it seem like it's so much right now that quick? And almost goes back to what I'm not gonna bring it up as a past topic or anything too, but the amount of decisions and the amount of stuff that needs to be clear. And, for us to say yes before, I mean, this is something that needs to be thought out pretty well, I think. I think we have a lot of very good ideas here, but I would encourage us not to, just kick something through the door just to try to get something in there. I don't think that's our goal, so.
And it could get lost in
And that also,
So May,
It's like the cost of
We want to be
ordinance.
obviously thoughtful on getting this.
Yeah, I agree.
So,
Otherwise, it's not gonna have the intended
Because it's
results.
presidential and they moved a lot of the May elections over.
right,
So you're going to
Oh,
be way at the bottom, very quickly ballot.
yeah,
Yeah, you can, the charter, the ordinance has to set out all the new language in the charter, and you guys need to make sure you're comfortable with that language. You know, you have one shot at
Yeah.
getting it unless you did a special call meeting, and
It's a lot.
the language is important for you to make sure it is right.
that's great.
Thank you.
All right. Other one bites the dust. All right, so we'll circle back to development services.
You're saying development process review?
Yes.
That I put together a little PowerPoint to kind of show what we do and what our process looks like. This top row, it's more of the submittal review portion of the timeframe. So when you start a project, first we make sure you have zoning. And your next step is to make sure your property is plotted correctly. And then for commercial projects, you have a site development permit and building permit. So after you get through all of the review and setting up the backup for your property, then you start construction. So once you get started on your project and you're getting close to being finished, we'll start with site inspections. So that's where we look at the flat work, parking, landscape and sidewalks, all of those fun things. And then you have building inspections where they're actually inspecting the structure itself. So once that's completed, you have to get a certificate of completion from the planning department saying that all of the things in your site plan were done correctly. And then you can get a certificate of occupancy. So this slide is kind of going through the zoning process, what we have to do to get a property zone. So we start with the application meeting where we talk to the applicant about what they're doing, what kind of zoning they need. Then they submit their application and we go through a review process. If it's a PUD, we have a longer review process where it's filtered through all the different departments. If it's regular zoning, it doesn't have that same extra time frame. And what we're starting to do, they'll probably see it in September, but for the August P&Z meeting, we're gonna have a more thorough planning analysis that actually provides information from engineering and fire about what roads are available, what expansion needs to happen, where are the utilities, those kinds of things. We've got a lot of requests from the commission for more information as well, so it'll help them make better decisions. So after we get through the review, we always like to talk to the applicant before we post it in the agenda. If we see something that we don't support, we want to give them a chance to kind of resolve it, or just move forward if that's what they want to do. So then we publish it in the newspaper, and we mail notice and post signs. We have to mail the notices and post signs 15 days before the meeting. And we've also implemented that new requirement about neighborhood outreach. We actually have our first application that had to do that, and I think it went okay, but they only had one neighbor. But they put forth an effort to meet with them and talk about what they were doing, so that'll be interesting as we get more applications next to residential to see how it goes. So after we get the notification, it goes to planning and zoning commission for the first public hearing, then it comes to council for a second public hearing and a first reading of the ordinance, and then council for a final reading of the ordinance. So this next slide, this is, when we're doing the plotting, these are the steps we go through with the applicant to figure out what needs to happen. So if they have 3 lots they want to make into 1 lot, that would be an amended final plat, and that's administrative because they're just taking away lot lines. If they have a property where they want to add lots and it's less than 4 lots and they have all the infrastructure they need, that's a short form final plat. And then when they have a project where they have to extend utilities and they're creating more than 4 lots, that's usually your residential projects, or if you have a larger commercial project, they have to go through those 4 steps. So they have the concept plan, and that one has a public notice that goes before the council. The prelim plat, that one stops at planning and zoning commission unless they request a variance the council takes action on, or if they remove a heritage tree. And then construction plans, those are actual plans for the public improvements like the roads and the water and the utilities. That's administratively approved. And then final plat, that one's approved by the planning and zoning commission. So in August of last year, we had to change our entire submittal process. So we have a standard review process and the alternative review process. This is kind of a screenshot from our application, but standard review, they turn in the application to the city, we review it, and then in 30 days, it's scheduled for review by the commission, even if it could be reviewed administratively, and that's where they get their comment letter if there were outstanding items. So we also created a alternative review process that's more similar to our old process, but we still have time frames. So this one actually goes a little faster than standard review. We go back and forth with the applicant on comments before it goes to the commission or it gets signed off by staff. And that's the development process. We did a couple of like case studies. I took 2 projects and we did a comparison to kind of see why one took longer than the other. I don't know if y'all want to go through that, or did y'all have questions about the process?
Okay, that was really fast.
Sorry.
A lot. So then I would love to have,
Yeah, we can go back.
I would love to have copies of that, just to absorb everything. So you know, when you're aware of the comments that we've received is that things go back and forth, and can you give me the whole list at one time? So where is that in this process?
Well, when you say that, as of August of 2019, we're not allowed to add new comments. So since that date, we haven't added new comments. We give them the whole list. And then if they add new things, we have to make new comments.
It changes everything.
But we can't know what they're gonna do to give
So
them
that
comments
fits
about it.
itself.
Correct.
Unless they go with the alternate review.
No, we can't add comments. Like that's our chance. We don't have any comments. Standard or alternative.
Yeah, so if I can jump in right quick, the process doesn't fix the engineer from redesigning and submitting new stuff, which generates new comments. And that's one of the things in one of the case reviews that we identified is that some of these where there's complaints about the process taking too long, it's because of incompleteness or because they're changing things in the midst of a review.
And those are things that we're not being told. And I know that from our side too, in some parts.
Well, and I can say this, coming from the outside, that is usually the problem. You approve, well, let's just say something good.
Do you want to go through my examples?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, you'll approve
So,
part of it,
right.
and then they change it, and then,
So
so then you approve another part, and then they change it, and then that is a universal issue that is frustrating as can be, because you're like, okay, we're trying to help you, but every time we say, this is okay, we go to that one, and you change that.
Show us around.
Yeah, so we took 2 projects, both of them are site development permits, and both of them were submitted after our changes, so we're trying to do similar projects. This one, they went through 4 reviews. When we started, we gave them a list of items to address. And as we went through the process, on the second review, they addressed, most of the items still had some left. On the third review, they were missing sheets in their submittal, so we couldn't figure that one out. And then on the fourth review, we were down to fixing a typo in landscape calculations and their fees. This applicant was very responsive. If you look at these numbers here, these are the numbers that are the amount of time that we had for our review. So they submitted January 21st, we completed the review in 21 days, and those are working days.
Calculations is misspelled, I just find that ironic.
I'm sorry,
A typo,
yeah,
there's a typo.
I'll do better with my spelling, I was in a hurry.
Send it back for a typo.
Well, it was a calculation,
Yeah,
it was a bigger deal than spelling. Yeah, I know, I see.
Well, it wasn't really tight, it was a calculation here.
Right, it was the numbers were wrong.
Yeah.
She's referring to that.
It's just ironic.
Yeah, it's ironic.
Literally calculations in there.
So this number down here, 47, that's the total number of the days that the city had it, like in our hands. And you look at the dates, the applicant would resubmit fairly quickly. They had one gap between the second and third review. So we sent comments in March, they didn't respond till May. But at the end, we had plans ready on the 5th, and then they submitted the final copies and everything on the 8th, so it only took them 2 days. And then we issued a permit 2 days later. So they were very quick and they were very interested in development. I have their site plan.
But in there, but it's sometimes into your defense, into the city's defense, we'll hear, oh, that's for 5 months, or whatever.
Yeah.
And that's all they'll tell you.
Right.
They will not tell you, oh, by the way,
I was missing 2 sheets.
I'm missing 2 sheets and I owe the engineer money, which I haven't paid, and I don't wanna pay anything else. Because I can't count, I don't have enough digits where that's actually happened. So the engineer doesn't resubmit plans for them to move forward because they haven't been paid. And
Or
they're
they're
always-
busy, like, we have a lot of them, they have a lot of projects too, and some of them don't get the priority, like, when you look at this one we went through 7 reviews, and it went from August of 2019 to April of 2020. And it's one where in our first review, we asked for a site plan and they didn't give us one. And we asked for that site plan repeatedly, so in the second review, their site plan didn't include anything on the checklist or required by the PUD, so we didn't have the things we needed to review. So that was the time we had to add new comments, because they actually gave us a site plan sheet. So I don't know if you can see this very well, this is their first submittal. There are no buildings, no driveways, no landscaping, there's nothing to look at, and they didn't give us a tree mitigation plan. And then on their second submittal, they numbered lots, but they're not plotting as lots. So they kind of changed the project, it's supposed to be a condo regime, where it's one big lot with dwellings on it. And they still didn't give us building footprints, landscaping, driveways, and a mitigation plan. And they had sheets that we couldn't read. So engineering couldn't read the detail sheets because they didn't print well. So we couldn't review them. And then on the third submittal, we finally got the buildings. You can't see them very well here. You can see over here, the problem they were having, it had a lot of white, like it looked like it was running out of ink on a lot of the sheets. They didn't comply with the parking requirements in the PUD that they wrote. They didn't show us any landscaping. The driveways didn't meet the requirement for the depth to count the parking space. They provided a mitigation plan, but it showed all the trees to be saved, but the table showed them be removed. So it was like one of those, like, we can't do
Pretty
anything
limited.
with that. And we're on the third submittal right now. Like most people, this is addressed on the second submittal. And then this is the fourth, they still don't comply with the parking, the driveways still aren't correct. The tree mitigation, I think this one this one they did show the dashes. But they showed trees that they weren't allowed to remove without doing an alternative plan or getting approval by the commission. So that was in our checklist, and they didn't address that one. And then on the fifth submittal, we still have the problem with the tree mitigation and parking requirements. This one, same thing, parking and tree mitigation. So this one, we just went back and forth a lot. We had a lot of cases where we offered to meet with them, to talk to them, we called, we didn't get a good response, and we didn't get the opportunity to actually talk through what the problem was. But they felt like since it was condo regime, that they didn't have to follow the same parking requirements that were listed. It was listed in the PUD how many spaces they had to have, but they felt like it didn't have to meet the code requirements for a parking space. But we should have had a conversation with them, we could have explained it and talked through it, and then we probably could have finished it faster.
Can I ask you a question on that? Do you think there's, how do I word this? There are clearly engineering and land planning firms that successfully blow through the process because they know the checklist, they know. And then there are others that do not.
So this engineer submits a ton of plans to us, they do a terrible job. Like, all their plans are difficult to read, they have no comments, so this is
And
kind
so
of that
that's a
engineer
staff-
specifically that.
That eats up staff time.
Absolutely.
So I have a question for you. So why can't we come up with a reasonable number of communications or submittals, however you want to term it?
So the number of reviews we normally have.
And, sure, so let's say 4, let's say we just, and I'm just picking it, but let's say, okay, we have 4 review processes, that's how much you get. If you don't get something back and it necessitates another one again, we're gonna start charging.
Oh, actually,
Your time.
Something we've started
we
doing.
did that one place. We did that one.
What we started doing is this one was one of our first ones that came in after the new submittal process. So we started, with the current ones, like when you go to that, it was the second one, where they didn't address anything on the checklist with regards to the actual site plan, they didn't provide anything, now we reject that. Like, we won't let them submit it to us and review it, we'll open the plans, we have a completeness check meeting, and we say, hey, you didn't do anything, we're not gonna take a week and a half to look at this, you have to try again. So we started doing that.
I think we should start charging people, and let me tell you, based on some things I heard from a recent one, the amount of phone calls that we allow people to do, we should start charging them for our time.
I got one thing, Rob, I know we talked about it, David, if you could, also is the issue of like a code compliance review report on front end. I know you don't do a
What does that
compliance
mean?
check,
Code
but
compliance review.
basically, before we would accept their submittals, they would recite back to us in summary.
We do, we give that, that's how we reject it now, because they do it to
And then we
the
would
comment letter.
So it's basically a check,
Yeah,
it's a
so
checklist.
what will happen is, like, each reviewer at the beginning of their comment, they will say, we will not accept a resubmittal if you don't provide X, Y, and Z. And then they have to respond with their comment letter saying how they fix things.
And what I'm saying is where they actually recite back to us, but within each thing in the checklist, not only the page, but then back to our ordinance. So they had to basically cross-check it, and it had to be, we had to sign affidavit from their design professional, that everything was true and correct. And then if it didn't, then it was kicked back. Now, the other thing was, one place I was at, we contracted for a lot of the reviews. So I believe it was so costly because we were contracting for those reviews. We weren't gonna redline engineer it. So we eventually, I think after the third, they started getting hit with, you wanna keep resubmitting, each time the fees are actually going up.
Right.
You basically
I
had,
love it.
and I realize that what it does, they've got to do their due diligence on the front end before they start submitting, because you mentioned, do they all do that, or do they not, do some not? I won't say which, let's say, restaurant products, they're both all over the state, I won't say that. In my experience, some of those firms, they've got such, they're so solid in their building plans, and they may have 3 or 4 different things they build every day. They take a longer time researching before they do their submittals. Once they do their submittals, it'll be like 1 review or 1.4 equivalent of comments. And by the time you get the second, everything is clean. And those are gonna be the ones that obviously you want. The others, you can hold their hand, it seems like, for weeks, months on end. And it's the same, you're basically trying to teach them how to do what would be an adequate submittal.
And there's no way to do kind of like a preferred,
So
like a
we've talked
gold
about-
star.
Well, we've talked about maybe coming up with a way to publish, everybody that submits plans, how many reviews they take, how long it took. We're not there yet, but it's something we've been talking about. We just don't want to publicly shame someone, that's awkward
Most of it.
all the time.
Well, it would be beneficial for us,
Sure.
if it's just to help us understand.
I will say that one of the challenges we will see if we do the increased fees after a certain number of reviews is you will get complaints then that we are intentionally failing someone
Right.
to get money. Like it goes in our pocket or something,
Right.
right? So that is something that
Now,
I've seen in the past.
in our case, we did that because we were contracting for that. So we were getting hit with the fees otherwise.
Yeah, right.
So it's like, basically, you get this many because this is how many your fees that upfront actually pay for. And then after that, it's,
I'm not saying that we shouldn't
Well-
charge a fee, I'm just telling you.
It would be nice if there was a positively reinforce something from somebody for doing great work rather than
Right.
doing something above and beyond and overreaching if somebody didn't do a great job.
And we
Yeah,
do
but
offer
here's-
to hold meetings with people and talk about comments when we can tell they're not understanding, or if there's something that's really significant.
Here's the thing, I believe that, there's too many people that clog up the process. And I mean, I can tell you, one that's coming through now, a former developer had it, and I mean, we spent 6 months on the stupid thing. He had never bought the land, and it all ended up just going away. And now somebody else picked it up and ran with it, thank goodness. But I mean, look at how much time they spent on it, we spent on it, it came to council, it came to P and Z. Why should the developer just get to do that and not have to pay anything for all the time?
They have to pay for their zoning submittals.
And it's based on square footage, so it's probably about 2,000, depending on the project size. But that's for site development.
yeah, but if it drags out over a multi-month period, $2,000 of staff time multiplied, you're not even close to recouping that.
We're bringing forward amendments to the fee schedule with the budget, so I think it's something we can work in. We already have to establish one for standard review, because after the second submittal, you have to pay a fee. So we can work on something for everything else.
On average, how many reviews does a normal project?
It's usually 3 or 4, depending on the size. We've had some that are 2, but 3 or 4 is pretty average.
So these are abnormal.
This one is, the first one was pretty normal. It was 4, yeah. And if you look at this one, they took like a month to turn in their plans. So we had them waiting in the lobby up until the 14th. So it was from the 8th to the 14th. It still was a long time. Usually when people pick them up, they come get them so they can keep going, but if they just sit there, we can't.
I mean, in a perfect world, we would not go beyond 3. Not perfect.
Yeah.
2 would be ideal.
The real world would be.
I certainly think after that, we're gonna start charging for this.
So we can look into it, maybe see what other cities do. I like to be consistent
Yeah.
with people, because I always like to complain about people not making it.
We're not trying to be punitive, but when they rush to get it in, there's no rush to get it right. That's,
Yeah, and my concern is, we've got a lot of people, investors coming in from outside of the area or outside of the state. Maybe they're national, and they
Those
just,
Get it right.
they don't,
those get it right,
well,
by comparison.
also, they don't know what local engineering firms to hire. to
Well,
help
that
get
is,
some-
yeah, some,
The ones we've had that were not local, that were with like, I think Taco Bell and Burger King, they were fast.
Yeah,
Like, they
they're-
read the code, they read the checklist, they were on it.
but they have a team that they use nationally. It's, and plus they have their software, I think they typically are dropping stuff in. Their systems are so elaborate that, I mean, they're tweaking okay, you're in this fire code, this building code. They look at our ordinance, and then by the time they submit it, it's pretty close.
I don't know about the machine, but.
And so in the bad example, is that someone who has done the the investor has done business in Leander before,
Yes,
and the engineer has.
yes.
Yeah, that's usually when it's all local.
Now, this engineer has done, several subdivisions for different developers now, and we're experiencing the same problem with all the different projects.
So I guess I'm wondering, like we mentioned, that I don't know the guy paying the bill understands where the problem is.
Right,
Because his engineer isn't gonna say, oh, I missed a day,
Well,
oh, I didn't sign.
because of this engineer, we started copying on all comment letters, so they know what's happening.
And Robert, what's kind of your workload? Like, how many cases are we currently doing right now?
So we have about 180 in the development process, and that means that they are active applications. So, usually we get 12 to 13, that's the middle cycle. And, Tuesday of last week, we got 55, because of the shutdown, like our building shut, but that's still high, if you do the math, for 3 weeks to get 55. So we're not slowing down.
And how many people do you have?
In my department, there are 7, I have 2 plan reviewers.
Is that what we need another one of? Is that what you're?
We're asking for a senior planner.
So you only have 2 plan reviewers?
Mhm.
And what are the others?
We have a clerk and a tech and a coordinator. We do have an assistant planner. He does dry utilities and building permit reviews.
And do you know offhand, like, how many hours it would take to review a plan? Or I guess that's gonna be.
Depends on the plan set. Yeah, it really depends on the plan set.
And so we've talked in the past about taking certain inspections out of your department and moving over. Building inspections,
So building inspections is already under engineering.
code enforcement.
No,
Oh,
building,
Okay.
Code.
building inspections is its own, it's not under engineering.
Okay.
Engineering has construction inspection.
Okay.
So building inspections, that's Linda.
Yes.
Why wouldn't they be under you?
That's how some cities structure it. We just don't have a structure that way.
Okay.
What's landscape inspections, is that under,
That one's kind of a weird shared one.
well, it's a weird one, period.
Yeah, well, we have it as part of our commercial, so, my planners will do the first inspection, and then we have the 2 landscape guys that come and check the rest, and then they handle the building permit.
Yeah, just like, it's one of those things where like, I run the risk of explaining this because I work in this and this part of it, but it seems like with our resources could really be used in other areas, and something like that, like, we have people that go out there and inspect, like, how many with like your invoice on your.
They're checking to make sure it's all there.
We've got an inspection before because they had too many glitches. Like, it's like really,
I'm learning more about that one.
Okay, I'm being serious.
Yeah.
Yeah, we go through these things that like, I believe the HOA should be doing, and then we don't have people who actually get the plans to do this stuff. So I hope that just in the big scheme of things, I thought about that already. Just as we're tightening up everything and you're finding great places to become more efficient as a city too, that's just one of those areas where I think like we're micromanaging one area that should be so far down in the weed, literally in the weeds, compared to everything else with HOAs are the ones that they go around and take a look at those things versus, man, what if we had that, maybe even that person or whatever it is, that resource could be used somewhere else, especially when we're trying to have positions and we're so understaffed. Just something that I've never thought before.
And so when there's disconnects and problems in the process, I'm sorry,
No, you go ahead.
that's exactly
Go ahead.
where you're going.
Yep.
You're gonna tell me what you
Yeah.
have done and what
Right.
you can do.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Okay. I was following your lead.
Yeah.
You set me up, thanks. Yeah, so this list on the screen, these are the changes that were made in, 2019 that y'all should be familiar with. We updated group homes, we updated our area order to create buffer zones. We replaced our access management to implement the text dot standards. We changed the width limit for residential driveways from 18, I think it's now, 25. We removed alley loaded requirements and made them optional. We updated the standards where you don't have to assume wastewater, you have septic systems, when it's appropriate. We updated our masonry and process requirements because of the house bills. We created incentives for masonry, so we can now allow gas pumps in front of buildings if they do 100% masonry, and we tied it to the multifamily density. We allowed for increased fence height from 6 to 8, and then we reduced screening requirements for LIC. And then we also made changes in 2020. We made smart code optional, street tree requirements optional, removed ABC streets. We changed how you measure caliper inch, so it's no longer 4 feet, it's now at 18 inches. We added cosmetic services to separate from tattoo parlors. We updated the cottage housing and tiny house districts and modified the multifamily, so you can no longer rezone a property multifamily without putting PUD with a mixed use component. And then we have a requirement that 75% of units have garage parking, and added a neighborhood outreach requirement for zoning cases. So then I have,
Can I ask a
Yes.
couple questions? Can you go back to that? So looking at what we've done, the one thing that kind of sticks out at me is the 75% of units have garage parking. We talked about having them inside the main building, rather than just
it's like tucked under,
yeah,
oh, like a parking garage.
well, either a ramp or a, in the unit.
Or basically, it's the
It's the first
It's the
floor.
same unit where
It's
the
podium.
right. Yeah. But is it possible to get that kind of high usage, high percentages doing it that way?
To get to 75%.
Well, I mean, what is the maximum you could get if you did require that would be? my question.
You probably would move to either maybe even at least 2 levels of parking below, or an actual parking garage.
The right.
Yeah, basically, you'd be creating a wrap probably.
Well, something we need to think about is anytime we get multifamily in now, it has to be PUD. So if we're looking for specific items like that, that's something that staff can request during the review process. So we could update the PUD section to kind of provide those kinds of guidelines for multifamily that we would want to see a podium park.
Well, truthfully, with that, at that point, you would have and I think when we say mixed use, I think the question would be if the goal is integrated mixed use versus basically shopping center adjacent to an apartment complex. So it's vertically integrated mixed use. And I think that might be one of the questions and answers and everything, from parking to it actually being ground level restaurant or retail. And so it's not just an apartment complex in a field, it becomes something that has a restaurant and a coffee shop and those other things.
So we have to update our standards because right now we allow horizontal.
Because to me,
mixed-use options, so
horizontal-
we just need to tweak that section.
The only reason I want to jump out and say this is that if you have 2 separate owners, you basically have garden apartments, one parcel, and then a little strip shopping center in front of it, we don't call that mixed use. We call that single use if it's separate ownership. So if it's one ownership, how does it, that's really not most people's understanding of mixed use. It's usually, it's either 0 lot line or it's integrated together somehow.
So essentially, you're saying like the 75% garage could be then first floor commercial instead.
No, I'm saying you have maybe a parking garage attached to the complex, and then the first floor of that building is also commercial.
I've seen some pretty cool projects where, the apartments, they have a full public, it's not an amenity center, it's a restaurant that then opens up into their pool. And then separately, they've got a gym and then maybe a retail spot for daycare. It's like their own little community.
If they're truly integrated in one site, which I'm not sure if the way our ordinance is written, that it really gets you there. If they really were able to do it with single-story buildings in some cases, I think we'd have to really dive into the kind of the land use planning piece to make it really truly mixed use.
So as part of our discussion of this, I wanted to talk about like, how do we get better developments? You know what I mean? Because when you go around Leander, and these are a list of our apartment complexes. I'm sorry, I'm not trying to disparage where people might live, because I've lived in apartments, for a long time. But there's nothing special about them at all. This is one in Flower Mound, and this connects to a little river walk. It's obviously got a park in the middle. It's got a clock tower. How can we get this, is my question. And this, rather than just seeing apartments go up, how can we get something that we can still be proud of, even though it is an apartment complex? Because we don't have anything in Leander, I think, that is like that. Nothing. So,
I think part of the goal would be that when someone would look at it, they say, I really want to live there because it also is a lifestyle component. And I think that's where we're trying to go.
how can we put that in ordinance regarding those types of developments?
This seems kind of like it was like a town center kind of project, where they probably had a lot of
Might go
land.
back, minimize this one.
And you didn't have a bunch of like,
They probably had components to it, and it all worked together as an inclusive project.
I don't see any developers saying, yeah, I want to do that because I stand
And
alone.
usually it's like, well,
Yeah,
we're
they're like,
together on a big master planned area.
Well, you can almost create a city within a city. Even smaller. Really neighborhood. When you talk about 350 units,
Well, when you look
in
at
one place,
that,
that's a neighborhood, really. So you almost create a self-contained neighborhood.
But that could have been a case where if we change how we apply, park standards to multifamily.
Correct.
So right now, we say, just pay the fee, don't worry about it. But if we were to say, no, you have to actually have a park
Yeah.
component to this
Yeah.
that's beautiful
I
and
agree.
the public kind of thing. So that could be a policy change, because the market evaluates and looks at things like that, like, well, some park complex, well, this stuff.
It's easier for them to just.
And they'll say, well, we don't do that.
You make a lot of money.
That's just,
Sure.
the standard answer is, we don't do this, we just put garden apartments in. We're not in the restaurant business, we're not in the parks business, we're not. And I think though, for that quality of life piece, so that is a nice place to live for everybody for 40, 50 years. Let's say 50. It needs to have some other components. Otherwise it's,
Can we, because look, here's the reality, when we talk about multifamily, this is a map of all the proposed and existing, and you can see, we will get to 8,000 apartments, 256 fourplexes, 211 duplexes, townhouses 195, 667 condos, giving us a total of 9,400. It's getting high.
and very light on the townhomes and condos by proportion.
Right, and we need some of those, but how many apartments have been approved? 8,000?
That includes plans, so that's a zoning for Bryson, so we don't have an actual plan in, but that would be approved for actions.
Yeah, and I know that we've got some that are trying now, and then some that are in the process that, are also wanting thousands. I think the question is, what's gonna be the limit? And then the second question is, even the ones that are in the pipelines now, I think we should require that. If you're gonna build them, that's what it's gonna look like. And even going down to, I don't know.
Oh, I have to interrupt, you can't go back and change the ones that are in works.
I'm talking about the ones
too.
that have not been approved yet.
Okay, I thought you were the ones that are in the
Yeah.
works now.
No.
Is that
These
what
are
you're-
townhomes.
Troy, while you're on that, so to Marty's point as well too, so if you have a smaller development that's, I'm just trying to figure out this is why I like that in the first place. You have a smaller development and let's say it's a couple hundred units or something like that, just a one isolated place on a few acres. they're either gonna pay their fee or they're gonna do their thing. So it's gonna be really good for that particular place. Has the thought and the process been in the past, since it's not gonna be enough to do a ton of damage anyways, we've taken that money and then used it in our park system to enhance it in other places to get everybody out and about. And I don't know what that number is.
I think our issue has been when the apartment developer buys the land, they buy it to build the buildings, they don't have enough left over for parkland. That's why they wanna pay the fee
Right.
instead, because they probably could.
They just wanna
instead pay for
build
it.
apartments.
Right.
So
Right.
then here's the thing,
Because we're gonna.
don't let them do that. We should not let them do it. You can't pay the park fee, you have to do a park of some type. Now, if you're in a smaller development, obviously it's not gonna be as big as, if you've got 100 acres to work with, but you've gotta do something that is going to add value, because here's the thing, those are the ones where they're just apartments, that 15 years from now, they're not gonna look like they do today. They're getting in, they're dumping these things off to somebody else, and then there we go. And they're not gonna be the ones that are timeless, that are gonna be getting the highest rents 15 and 20 years from now.
And with COVID, people, maybe, who knows how long they're gonna maybe work from home off and on. Having those kind of park amenities within that community, really a self-contained, a little bit more sustainable, meaning, when I say sustainable, meaning you can buy milk and you can go to a park and all that, all right there without having to get in your car.
So I do think we could include that since we're doing cuts for these projects anyway, and that could be part of our discussion with the applicant, if council has a decision for a central park project.
So projects,
Yeah, for sure.
projects above a certain density, projects of a certain size would not be able to do a fee and lift requirement that we're talking about. Parkland.
Yeah, or you wouldn't be able to do the whole thing. So let's say, again, using Chris's example, you have a smaller development, so you're not gonna be able to do this large one. Well, instead of letting them just stack all these apartments, you've got to do, so we need to come up with what that would look like, right, for a small one.
So here's one of the things, is you can pack hundreds of apartments in 4 acres, 5 acres. And so what that does is that developer can pay astronomical prices for that land. Because it's only 6 acres, 7 acres.
Okay, the price per foot is really high,
The price,
once it's entitled.
exactly. And so then that actually misleads other landowners to think, oh, well,
Commercial.
yeah, I should get, $10 a square foot because my neighbor got $10 a square foot. And so requiring the parkland, I think, spreads out the cost. You can't pay that much per acre if you also have to have the parkland and you have to have some of the amenities. You have to buy a bigger piece of land.
Absolutely. And I think one of the things we're suffering from when we talk about commercial, and I'll use an example from a developer that we know really well, right? Somebody that's worked with us a lot. And, he called me about, he's got some land that he has that he wants to do flex office. We need flex office really bad, right? I mean, it'll fill up, and that's for smaller businesses. It's not as expensive, so, it's very attractive for people with medium and small sized businesses, right? But he's saying that at $6 a foot for the land, he cannot make money on the office. He has to have at least 200 apartment units. And that's the dilemma. Do we say, okay, no problem, because it's gonna get us the offices we want? Or do we say, nope, we don't need it?
Cedar Park has about 5,500 apartments. My point all along, when someone says, oh, you have to have the apartments in order to get the businesses, well, guess what? Cedar Park's got 5,500 and they have all of our jobs.
You don't, that's a misnomer.
So, I mean, obviously, we're trying to get a better quality of life in those areas. So I wonder if there's a way to structure it where there's like a menu where it's like, oh, you want to go to apartments? Okay, great, here's the menu. You have to choose from these other quality of life improvements, whether it be park space,
I like it.
or commercial.
To use a pattern book from the past.
Oh my gosh,
Let's put it in.
let's call it a menu, we like that.
But
But I
then
feel like
it's
we've already got that in the PUD, so we have a list of higher standards we look for. So staff can probably do a better job
Must be
of
higher
guiding us
land
and
use.
saying, hey,
Yeah,
there
the
will
land
be
use,
standards.
That's it.
Yeah, that's what it is. It includes park plans.
It's not-
There are items in there, but we could guide people in that direction.
I mean, honestly, I think we need to. I mean, I think, we're getting even housing developments, and I have a picture on my other phone of one in Dallas Fort Worth. Houston has a lot of them. Cypress has ones that I've talked to you about. And that is, in a single family neighborhood, you got this giant pond, and it becomes, a walking path, a place where the whole community kind of ends up, that's where everybody goes, right? And, we've talked in the past, can we fill up our detention ponds that we require? But like Cypress, right down the road from that outdoor lake type development we discussed, they've got a big one. Saw one in Dallas Fort Worth recently, and it's just such an amenity for the neighborhood. So even in our single family neighborhoods, I think we need to start requiring something for the community right there, if it's.
Open to the public or?
So that's the thing right there, yes, because now we're taking the focus, we're saying we want everybody to individually focus on just this thing rather than the city as a whole, because right now, go ahead.
I was gonna say, our trail system does that.
Yes.
But maybe that's not done.
Right. But I mean, think about it, really, Lakewood is inside of the neighborhood, if you will. So, you could have those amenities when we think about developments and like mixed use, the idea is that you can do everything right there. So, it's kind of the same thing. You got a pond that's more of an amenity. It could be for everybody. The golf course has ponds.
But
there's some
HOAs in these communities and everybody will be the first ones to call you and say, you're not in our neighborhood, get the hell out. Excuse my language, but that's. what-
Yeah, if it's owned by the HOA.
That's what they will be.
And I think our parks plan designates areas where we want to see the regional parks, right, and the trail system. So if we want to require stuff like that, we probably need to update that to show that the city's able to maintain.
And quite frankly, honestly, like, let's say Crystal Falls, for instance, the little pond lake there, we do a community, the city used to stock it with fish, and then everybody could go fishing there. They didn't kick anybody out because you weren't in the Crystal Falls.
You're talking about the one that's on Lakeline and,
But
that's.
yeah, the just.
But most are on major roads like that too, so you gotta go get into the neighborhood where, let's say, 100 homes or 200 homes, whatever.
Yeah, I still think it's an amenity that is pretty awesome. The reason I had this up here, we hear so often now that you can't build retail without apartments. And I'm here to tell you, this is Denver, it's a great shopping center. And there's a movie theater on the other side, and it's all retail, there's no apartments, there's hotels nearby. There's also, minimize this one, there's another one in Chronicles that's brand new. Go down a little bit. It's in between, right here. Same thing. This is a brand new shopping center in New Braunfels right off of 35. It's across from the cutoff to go to Green if you go west. And it's just right there.
Well, our leakage reports are, I'm sure they're worse than they were in terms of how much disposable income, sales tax we're losing to the south.
Yeah.
I don't believe you should have to hit 10,000 apartment units before you get one Lametta.
No.
I mean,
We have
that
the roof
flies in the
tops.
face so when developers do come with that, I don't think that all comes at all.
And you know what, here's the thing, I think we are getting we're getting multifamily developers wanting to do multifamily. That's what we're getting. And then they throw in a little retail to get us to go, wow, next team's cool. That's, we're not getting
You're not
people
getting,
that wanna do
you're not
this.
getting a couple 100,000 square feet. No, you're not getting that. You're getting 20,000 square feet thrown up as a sacrificial.
You can still get this, we can get this. Well, in my opinion, we gotta do is stop buying into this narrative that you can't get that, because there's too many examples where they're still building it. It's just we're accepting that and we're buying into it, and all this, we keep feeding the residential machine. And at some point, in my opinion, we gotta say, no.
Well, look at Cedar Park, Bell Boulevard, redevelopment, that's gonna be packed full of commercial. And they only have 5,500 apartments. We have a lot more rooftops, not just apartments, but rooftops than Cedar Park, and in the plan, more apartments. We have the demand in Leander. It's what can we do to attract them here?
Actually, so those commercial centers to our south, they're drawing the circle for retail demand. They're including our
Oh, yes.
residential in the justification.
Absolutely, because they know we don't have a choice.
And they're refusing to expand our area because of that.
That's right, we're too close.
Right, we don't wanna be their shoppers.
Now, there are examples that's one reason we can't go on 8 ball on the commercial piece for too long. There are examples of bedroom communities that get so much edge saturation on both ends. So the community on the other side, upstream and downstream, both build out. And then you're entirely the bedroom community with a terrible tax base ratio on AV and sales by comparison. And it's simply because those national retailers, they start running the circles, they're like, wait a minute. You're too close to the entities down here, and you're too close to the ones up here. And I do think there is obviously a mad rush to fill in as much of the residential as possible because the banks are lending for it.
Well, you just said the key right there, that's why we're getting so many.
Because they're lending.
The banks
Well,
are lending
and-
for it.
Liberty Hill got a Schlotzsky's, and then Schlotzsky's just built at 1431 of Reagan,
There's your, see that, there,
and they totally skipped over us.
that has happened.
And how did Liberty Hill get Schlotzsky's?
Because when you draw those two circles,
Oh, I know.
our folks will go to the one to the south and on the north end. And I think obviously the demand would be here, but not if we only fill in with residential.
Robin, weren't they gonna be where,
Well, next to it, there are 3
Oh,
paths, so I didn't hear they were gone yet. I thought they were still
Oh.
looking, so
okay,
I'm not confident.
somebody told me that they were going out and,
My understanding is both were always planned, so, but I have a guy at FEMA, so I'll do that. Find out.
okay. But, so this, I don't think retail's dead. In fact, I think this whole thing that we're in is gonna need to kind of swing back the other way, because people have been cooped up and worrying online forever. I mean, at some point, it's like, how fun is it to just do online shopping? When it's kind of going and picking out a kayak or shoes, or, I never can get shoes with it, right, everything.
Can I suggest, I think we're all agreeing here, can I suggest that we go back to here on the,
Yeah.
to let Robin go through it, because I think we're all on the same, we're all on the same page.
Well, the reason I put that in there is because, it really didn't fit any other category. Sure. And I think it needs to be a part of development services, so my question to you is, to get this, to separate the two out, to get the amenity things, do we need to change the ordinances? Or is that something you can do?
How about, let me look at it, And then we can do a follow-up and I can
Okay.
email status.
Sounds good.
Well, okay, quick 5 minutes.
How long? How much more do you think you have?
So her recommendations are still coming, so we still got a little bit of time.
Okay, all right, we'll take a 5-minute break.
How's it going?
I understand where you're.
So, yeah, how are they dealing with this?
Yeah. Am I wrong? Yeah, my uncle lives, coast, and, so he lives on Facebook. And he's like, hey, get your bike and, the city, or whatever the streets.
Where did you get that from?
Typically first two, they have two parking